My family stole $133,000 from my credit card for my spoiled sister's luxury trip, but when the company investigated the photos she posted on Instagram, I reversed all charges and left them with nothing while they begged at my door. I'm 29 years old, work in finance, and what my family did to me a few months ago basically destroyed any kind of relationship we had. I still have trouble processing that this actually happened. Like, when people ask me why I don't talk to my parents anymore, I don't even know where to start because it sounds so absurd it seems made up. But here we are, and I need to get this off my chest because the rage I felt, and honestly still feel, is something I'd never experienced before in my life. I guess I should start from the beginning so you understand the full context. I'm the oldest child, always been the responsible one, the one who did things right. You know, that type of son that parents brag about to their friends but then ignore at home. My sister Megan is 23, just graduated from college, and she's basically been the family favorite since she was born. I'm not exaggerating when I say that literally everything has always been about her. When I was her age, I was working full-time and paying my own expenses because my parents made it very clear it was time to be independent. But with Megan, everything has been different. They paid for her entire college tuition, the car, the apartment near campus, literally everything. And look, it's not that it bothered me per se. Honestly, I'd already made peace with the fact that she was the favorite. It's just that what happened next crossed every imaginable boundary. The whole thing started like 5 months ago. Megan graduated from college in May, and I, being the older brother who wants to maintain some relationship with his family despite everything, bought her a pretty decent graduation gift. A new laptop, a Mac because she studied graphic design or something like that, cost me like $2,500, but whatever. She's my sister, and I thought it was a nice gesture. I went to the graduation dinner, smiled in the photos, congratulated my parents on having such a successful daughter, the whole routine. During that dinner, Megan asked to borrow my credit card because apparently she'd forgotten hers at home and wanted to buy something online that night. I don't remember what exactly. I think she said it was a subscription or something. I gave her my card without thinking much about it because, she's my sister. What could happen? About 2 weeks passed and I was at work. It was a normal Tuesday. I think it was early June, when I get a call from my mom. She almost never calls me during work hours, so I answered thinking maybe something serious had happened, and well, technically something serious did happen, but not in the way I expected. My mom, all excited, tells me, "Logan, I have to tell you something incredible. We did for Megan," and I'm thinking, what now? Did they buy her a new car? An apartment? But no, it was worse, much worse. Turns out my parents, in their infinite wisdom and without consulting me about anything at all, decided that Megan deserved a graduation trip to Europe. But not a normal trip. Not a week in Paris or something reasonable. No, they booked a full month-long trip, visiting like 8 different countries, staying in luxury hotels, private tours, expensive restaurants, the complete VIP experience. And here comes the part that still makes my blood boil when I think about it. They charged everything to my credit card. The full $133,000. $133,000 that I didn't authorize, that I didn't even know existed, charged to my account without my permission. When my mom told me, I honestly thought she was joking. I said, "Mom, what are you talking about?" And she, as if it were the most normal thing in the world, explained that since Megan still had my card and they wanted to surprise her with this trip, they simply used my information to make all the reservations. My mom literally told me, "We knew you'd support us on this. Logan, Megan worked very hard in college and deserves to celebrate big." I asked her if she was completely crazy, if she understood they'd just spent $133,000 of my money without asking me, and she got all defensive saying it was family, that I made good money in finance, that I should be happy to be able to help my sister. I hung up the phone and literally sat at my desk in shock for, 10 minutes? My coworkers were asking if I was okay and I couldn't even speak. I immediately opened my bank app and there they were, pages and pages of charges. First-class flights, 5-star hotels in London, Paris, Rome, Barcelona, Vienna, Prague, Amsterdam, and Berlin. Private tours, Michelin restaurants, even charges for a professional photographer who was going to travel with them to document the entire trip. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through the charges, each one more ridiculous than the last. A hotel in Paris that cost $8,000 for 3 nights. A private tour in Rome for $4,500. Flights that added up to like $25,000 just for the 3 people. It was absolutely insane. I called my dad thinking maybe he'd be more reasonable, that maybe I could make him understand the magnitude of what they'd done. But no. He basically told me he understood I was upset, but that it was already done, that the reservations were mostly non-refundable, and that we should talk about it when everyone was calmer. I told him, "Dad, you spent $133,000 without my permission. That's literally fraud." And he responded that I shouldn't be dramatic, that it was a family matter and we'd resolve it. He told me Megan was already super excited and that canceling the trip would devastate her, as if that were my problem. I tried to talk to Megan directly. I called her and asked if she knew what our parents had done with my card. She, with that all-innocent voice she uses when she wants to play victim, told me yes, that Mom had told her about the trip and that she was very grateful to me for being so generous. I said, "Megan, I didn't authorize this. I need you to return my card right now," and she laughed, literally laughed, and told me, "Oh, Logan, don't be bitter. It's just money. You earn a lot anyway." That left me speechless. Just money? $133,000 is just money? The next few days were absolute chaos. I tried to reason with my parents, but they'd already decided I was the villain of the story for not wanting to support my sister. My mom sent me text messages saying things like, "We always knew you were selfish, but never thought you'd reach this level." And my dad called me to say he was disappointed in me. That family should be there for each other. The irony of those words coming from them was almost comical. The trip was scheduled to start in a week. I was desperate trying to find a solution. I called my credit card company to report the charges as fraud, but they told me that since I had technically given my card to Megan voluntarily, and she'd used it, it didn't qualify as traditional fraud. They explained, I'd have to prove I specifically told her she could only use it for a limited purpose and that she'd exceeded that permission, which was true but difficult to prove without documentation. They told me I could dispute the charges, but that the process would take weeks or months, and in the meantime, I was responsible for the payments. Megan, my parents, and the photographer they'd hired departed for Europe on a Saturday morning. I didn't go to the airport, obviously. My mom sent me a photo of the 4 of them at the gate, all smiling with their brand new luggage, which they'd also charged to my card, obviously. And the message said, "Thanks for making this possible, Logan." When I say I saw red, that's an understatement. I was so furious I couldn't even eat, couldn't sleep, just kept thinking about how they'd basically robbed me and were now flaunting it. But here's where things get interesting. I mean, where I decided I wasn't going to be the passive victim in this situation. If they wanted to play dirty, I could play dirtier. I spent that entire weekend researching my options, reading the terms and conditions of every reservation they'd made, contacting lawyers, basically preparing for war. Monday morning, Megan started posting on Instagram. Photos on the first-class plane with champagne, photos at the luxury hotel in London, photos at expensive restaurants. Each post made me angrier. But then she posted something that was the final trigger. A photo of her luggage with various travel tags, and on one of those tags, she'd placed my credit card. She'd literally stuck my card as decoration on her suitcase and posted it on social media. The caption said something like, "Traveling in style thanks to the best big brother ever," with like 1,000 emojis. That was it. I called the credit card company again, but this time with a different strategy. I explained the entire situation to them, showed them the Instagram posts where Megan literally displayed my credit card, which goes against their own terms of and told them I wanted to report this formally. I also asked them to freeze my account immediately to prevent additional charges. The representative was super understanding this time, especially after seeing the visual evidence, and told me they'd do a complete investigation, but that wasn't enough for me. I spent the next 2 days systematically contacting every airline, every hotel, every tour company, every restaurant that appeared on the itinerary. I explained the situation to them, provided proof that I was the cardholder and that these charges hadn't been authorized, and asked them to cancel or at least put an alert on all reservations. Some were more cooperative than others, but several hotels agreed to cancel future reservations. Some tour companies did the same, and the airlines put alerts on the return flights. And then, on Wednesday of that first week, I completely froze my credit card account. Not just for future charges, but I requested that all pending authorizations be declined. I knew this was going to cause massive chaos, but honestly, I didn't care anymore. They'd decided my money and my trust were worth nothing, so why should I facilitate their stolen luxury trip? The results were immediate, and, I'm not gonna lie, pretty satisfying. I started receiving messages from my mom saying there was a problem with the card, that several charges were being declined, that they needed me to fix it immediately. I responded with something super simple. No. Just that, no. She called me hysterical, saying they were in the middle of Europe without access to sufficient funds, that this was ridiculous, that I was ruining Megan's graduation trip. I told her they'd ruined it by stealing from me, hung up, and temporarily blocked her number. The next 2 weeks were absolutely chaotic for them, and I followed every development through Megan's increasingly desperate Instagram posts. First, they had to move from the 5-star hotel in Paris to a 3-star one because their future reservations were canceled. Megan's photos showed noticeably smaller and less luxurious rooms. Then, several of their private tours were canceled, and they had to join regular group tours with like 50 people. The professional photographer apparently left after the first week because his payment was declined. That charge was like $15,000 for 4 weeks. Absolutely insane. In Rome, they had an incident where a large charge at a restaurant was declined, and they had to call my parents' bank, which took them hours to resolve and was apparently super embarrassing. Megan stopped posting as frequently after that, and when she did, they were no longer photos of champagne and luxury, but rather normal selfies at public tourist spots. But the best part, where I really felt there was some justice in all of this, was with the return flights. When they arrived at the airport in Berlin for their return flight to the United States, the airline informed them their tickets had been flagged for possible fraud, and they couldn't board. My parents had to buy new tickets on the spot, on regular economy flights, and this cost them like $6,000 of their own money. Plus, they couldn't fly that day, so they had to stay 2 extra nights in Berlin at a cheap hotel near the airport, paying for everything out of pocket. While all this was happening in Europe, I was taking legal action here. I went to the local police station and filed a formal fraud report. I showed them all the evidence, the bank statements, the conversations, where my parents admitted using my card without permission, Megan's Instagram posts, everything. The officer who helped me was almost as outraged as I was. He told me this was clearly a case of identity theft and misuse of financial information, and that even though they were my parents, that didn't give them legal right to use my card that way. The officer suggested they could intercept my family at the airport when they returned to ask them some questions. I agreed. Part of me felt bad for going that far, but the bigger part, the part that had been completely betrayed and robbed, wanted them to face real consequences. When they finally returned, 2 officers were waiting for them at the airport. They told me later that my mom got hysterical, that my dad tried to explain it was a family misunderstanding, and that Megan started crying. They took them to a room to question them, and basically explained that what they'd done could result in serious criminal charges. They didn't arrest them because I hadn't formally pressed charges yet, but they made it very clear that if they didn't resolve this civilly with me, things could get much worse. That same night, all 3 showed up at my apartment. They hadn't even gone to their house first. They came straight from the airport, with their suitcases and everything. I didn't want to open the door, but my mom was banging so hard and screaming so much that neighbors started coming out, so I opened to avoid a bigger scene. They came into my apartment, and, can you believe it? They were angry at me. My mom started yelling at me about how dare I ruin Megan's trip. How could I be so cruel to involve the police, that I'd humiliated the entire family? My dad was trying to stay calm, but was also telling me I'd overreacted, that we could have resolved this like adults without legal drama. And Megan, sitting on my couch crying, saying I'd ruined the best moment of her life, that she'd never forgive me. I let them talk for a while, just listened with my arms crossed, waiting for them to finish their show. When they finally shut up, I told them something I'd been preparing in my mind for weeks. I told them what they did wasn't a mistake or a misunderstanding, it was intentional and premeditated theft. That they'd taken $133,000 of my money without permission, that they'd tried to manipulate me into accepting it using family guilt, and that when I refused, they made me feel like I was the villain. I told them their angry reaction toward me proved they never intended to respect me or take responsibility for their actions. My mom tried to interrupt, but I kept talking. I told her she'd chosen Megan over me since we were kids, that I'd always been the convenient son who didn't need attention until they needed something from me. I told my dad that his silence and complicity were just as damaging as Mom's actions. And I told Megan, she was 23 years old, that it was time to grow up and understand the world didn't revolve around her, and that actions have consequences. I told them the credit card company had ruled in my favor after their investigation, and that all $133,000 was being reversed, which was true. They'd called me that same day with the news. I also told them that if they weren't willing to admit what they did was wrong and apologize genuinely, without buts or excuses, then I didn't want anything to do with any of them. My mom, instead of apologizing, told me I was a horrible son, that she'd raised me to be better than this, and that if I cut contact with them, I'd regret it. My dad looked at me like he was disappointed but didn't say anything significant. And Megan kept crying, saying everything was my fault. I asked them to leave. My mom refused and said, we weren't going to leave until we fixed this. So I took out my phone and called the non-emergency police line and told them I had people on my property who were refusing to leave. That got them moving fast. They grabbed their suitcases and left, but not before my mom yelling at me from the hallway that someday I'd understand what I'd done, that I'd destroyed the family over money. I closed the door and honestly broke down. Not because I felt bad about what I did, but because I finally processed that my family had really done this to me. That they'd really chosen $133,000 of my money over any kind of relationship with me, and that even after everything, they couldn't admit they were wrong. It's been like 4 months since then. I haven't talked to any of them since that night. My mom has sent me occasional text messages, always trying to make me feel guilty, saying things like, your grandmother is very sad about this, or I hope you're happy living alone without family. My dad called me once to tell me we should talk, but that I needed to take the first step and apologize. Megan blocked me on all social media, which honestly is a relief. The credit card company did indeed reverse all the charges after their investigation. They said there was clear evidence of unauthorized use and that my case was well documented. That meant my credit wasn't affected, and I didn't have to pay a single cent of that $133,000. Technically, my parents could be in legal trouble if the company decided to go after them to recover the losses, but I don't know if they have, and honestly, I don't care. I changed all my passwords, updated my security, information on all my accounts, and put fraud alerts on everything. I also talked to a lawyer about possibly filing a restraining order if my family keeps trying to contact me or show up at my apartment. But for now, it seems they've gotten the message. Some friends and acquaintances who know parts of the story have asked me if I regret how I handled things, if I should try to reconcile with my family. The answer is no. What they did crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a conscious decision to steal from me and then try to manipulate me into accepting it. And when it didn't work, they turned me into the villain. Last week I was organizing some papers and found an old photo of when Megan was little, like 5 years old, and I was 11. We were at Disneyland, and I was carrying her on my shoulders so she could see the parade. I remember that day clearly. Remember taking care of her all day, making sure she ate, buying her a stuffed animal with my allowance money I'd been saving. I looked at that photo for a good while and thought about at what point things broke down so badly. At what point I stopped being her protective older brother and became just a source of money for her. But then I remembered all the times I chose to stay quiet when they treated me differently. All the times I justified their behavior with, well, she's younger, or mom's just being protective. I remembered this situation didn't appear out of nowhere. It was the result of years of allowing myself to be walked over, of putting their needs before mine, because that's what was expected of the responsible older son. I'm working with a therapist now, which has been helpful. They're helping me process not just this incident, but all the years of toxic family dynamics that led to this. They're helping me understand that setting boundaries isn't cruel, it's necessary. That cutting contact with people who hurt you, even if they're family, doesn't make you a bad person. I don't know if I'll ever have a relationship with my family again. Maybe in the future, if they truly change and take genuine responsibility for what they did. But for now, I'm focused on myself, on my own healing, on building relationships with people who respect and value me. And honestly, for the first time in a long time, I feel at peace with that decision. I no longer carry the guilt of being the son who didn't meet his family's impossible expectations. I'm just Logan, 29 years old, living my life, and that's enough.